Oh hey guys, I was just pondering the meaning of life, and before things started to get a little deep, I decided to play some video games to keep my mind off the horror. There is no meaning. I've been playing a lot of Super Smash Bros, and it occurred to me that I could go through the first 3 games in the series and see what the series was like when it started, and what led Nintendo to make the greatest commercial ever made. The first game in the series released on the Nintendo 64. The game was developed by Masahiro Sakurai, the developer of the Kirby games. The idea came about when Sakurai was trying to make a new IP, and one of the prototypes he made was for a fighting game with no health bars that could be played by beginners and experts. Now, the initial design for the game had simple, basic characters, not the famous Nintendo classics and video game classics in general like we see today. It only came about when he was approached by a fellow employee that suggested that the characters should be Nintendo characters. Sakurai created a non-sanctioned demo after he had the game well balanced and showed it off with 4 playable characters, Samus, Fox, Donkey Kong, and Mario. And after seeing it, the idea got approved and was developed by HAL Laboratory. The game released on January 21st, 1999 in Japan, April 26, 1999 in North America, and November 19th, 1999 in Europe. Now that is an intro. Now starting with the single player options, let's start with the tried and true classic mode, which in this game is just called single player mode. You fight a series of battles with different characters on different stages, and have little challenges after every 3 battles, and then fight the Master Hand at the end, with the theme of this game being that they are toys and that is the hand that controls it all. The mode is same for all the characters, it's always the same thing. Now these 3 challenges you got in between some of the fights are breaking targets, boarding platforms, and reaching the finish. Now while this mode may be kind of annoying with there being no variety in the battles, at least the target practice is uniquely designed around that character's moveset. Now you can play the target and platform challenges separately, and you can play training mode to really get the hang of a character's moveset, but then that's about it for single player modes, and moving on to multiplayer, you can play stock battles or time battles with up to 4 players, and you can change a few of the settings and mess with how many lives or how much time you have during the fight. Now this is how many characters you start with, and this is how many there are after you get the unlockables. This is how many stages there are, with this Super Mario Bros. One being unlockable. And that's it for the first Super Smash Bros. Game. Not much, but still fantastic for how new this was. But before we move on to the next game, we have to talk about this commercial Nintendo made for Super Smash Bros. I mean, Nintendo characters beating the nuts out of each other? Come on, this is the peak of advertising. Well, time to move on to what is considered the best game in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Oh, hell yeah. Okay, I don't care how good of a game this is, because my god is this box art horrendous. It looks like they had a couple hours to make it, so they put a couple 3D models in there, added a background and some rectangles, slapped the logo on, and said, good enough. The concept of Melee started not long after the release of the first game, and the design was worked on before GameCube dev kits even came out. Sakurai announced he was working on a new Smash game during E3 1999, and him and his development team worked really hard to get this thing released near the launch of the GameCube. Nintendo showed off a demonstration of the game at E3 2001 and would post weekly updates about new characters and stages the game was going to have on the Japanese official website. And on December 3rd, 2001, the game released in North America shortly after the GameCube's launch, and wow have things improved. while the intro shows us that, oh wow, they're trophies now.
Big deal. I'm a functioning being in society, but you don't see me bragging about it. At least that's what my parents told me.
So here's the menu. Nice and simple, just like ginger ale.
Why do people drink this stuff? Like me.
So for single player modes, we got Classic, Adventure, Event Matches, Stadium, and Training. So let's play the tried and true Classic mode, and man have things improved. There's actual variety here. Now there's still some set things like fight a giant version of a character or fight a metal version of a character, and always end with a battle with Master Hand. The challenges are the same ones from the first game, just improved. With the Get to the Finish challenge, there are multiple exits, with the farther ones getting you more points, and the closer ones getting you less points. And the target challenges are just as fun and challenging as the previous game, but not too challenging. Instead of the boarding the platforms challenge, you have a collect the trophy challenge, where 3 trophies fall and you try and get it into this thing, where if you do, you get that trophy added to your collection. Other than that, the battles and fights are ordered really well, and this is a really good mode overall, and really feels like an improvement from the first game. The Adventure mode lets you explore the worlds of different Nintendo games. You can go through the Mushroom Kingdom, explore a Zelda dungeon, and try to escape a planet before it explodes like in Metroid. There's a lot of fights in this mode, and a lot of basic enemies that are from that particular series that the stage is based off of. Once you get through that, you fight Bowser, and if you're playing on a higher difficulty, you also get to fight Giga Bowser.
Since when did Bowser become a Chad?
Adventure mode is a very fun experience that lets you explore the worlds of Nintendo's most cherished IPs. Now in Stadium, you can play Target Test, Home Run Contest, where you hit a sandbag as far as you can, and Multi-Man Melee, where you fight an onslaught of multiple enemies at once, and it's a very fun mode to make you feel accomplished.
Because everyone knows that's the only thing I've accomplished in my life.
Event matches are little battles you have to win, but with certain conditions and settings, like you're only allowed to KO Zelda if she is in the form of Sheik. Training mode isn't much different, you have some more options for the camera, but it's mostly the same. Now the multiplayer options are the same, but now there's a coins mode in Versus. It is actually a pretty fun, albeit odd mode. There's a tournament mode that's pretty much how it sounds, but there's now a special melee mode where you can really mess with the rules of the game. Now these are all the characters you have at the start of the game, and the rest are unlockables. And these are some interesting choices. Ice Climbers.
Who the hell is that?
There are also a few clone characters like Dr. Mario, Pichu, and Young Link. Now these are all the stages, and you have a ton more with this game compared to the last. The graphics of this game are a big step up. I mean, this was a graphical showcase for the GameCube, and looks fantastic even today. And let's not forget the theme of this game, trophies. Now you can collect different trophies by this little challenge in Classic mode, and exploring the worlds in Adventure mode, and you can check out the trophies in the trophy gallery that give a description of the character or object and what game it's from, and you can get a good view of the trophy as well. Now there was something similar in the first Smash game, but it was just the main fighters you could play as. The combat and fighting feels a lot faster and smoother, and now you have a side special attack, all adding to a much more refined experience than the previous game.
And that's it for Super Smash Bros. Melee, a really nice step up from the first game, with a lot more to offer and really nice graphics.
And now let's move on from the best game in the series to the worst game in the series. That is a very interesting turning of the tables, but I don't care what people think or say about Brawl, because look at that box art. You go from something where they were trying to slap together in an hour to a masterpiece of cover art. The game was not developed by HAL Laboratory this time, as Masahiro Sakurai had left the company. Sakurai agreed to make it because it was announced at E3 2005 to already be in development, and he was allowed to be the director of the team, and his new company was put in charge of the project, and development began. The game was released March 9th of 2008 in North America. Super Smash Bros. Brawl is often considered the worst Super Smash game, but I think it's pretty good, albeit not the best. The single-player offerings of this game are similar to Melee, but with some changes. Classic mode is now worse than Melee because while there is variety, there's just not as much as Melee, and the fights feel kind of the same every time. It's repeating pointless battles. The challenges in Classic mode are terrible. All you have now is target practice. You have 2 levels and they are awful. They are too easy and they are the same for every fighter. What happened to the target challenges that were specifically designed around the moveset of whatever fighter you were playing as? It's just so boring compared to Melee, and it feels endless with the onslaught of battles that all feel the same. Now, Adventure Mode is a lot better and a lot worse at the same time. Called the Subspace Emissary, it's way longer than the Adventure Mode in Melee, where you were supposed to do it in one sitting and it doesn't take too long, but this is long. You can save between stages, there's an entire story for this that so far isn't making much sense to me, and you can't just play as any fighter. As you progress, more fighters get added to your group. And on top of that, some levels have specific character selections that you have to abide by. The stages in the Subspace Emissary are very generic and aren't really themed like the short stages of Melee's adventure were. While I prefer the stages themed around different Nintendo characters' worlds, the levels of Subspace Emissary are still pretty nice and fun to go through, not to mention the fact that you have a lot more of it. Now, moving on, you still got event matches, and the target, home run, and multi-man challenges, as well as training mode. Now, moving on to multiplayer modes, it's pretty much the same as Melee. You just have a few more options you can mess around with. Now, in terms of new features, you have Masterpieces, which lets you play incredibly short demos of classic Nintendo games, which is pretty cool. There are now something called Challenges, which are kind of like achievements but with rewards. You still have trophies like from the previous game, and you can pick up hints for hidden challenges. Now, the graphics of this would look really good to me if I wasn't using an incredibly cheap HDMI converter to record and play this. But I can tell that if I had this game hooked up normally, this would look amazing. For one, the character models have all been updated to look more modern, and it just looks like more detail got put into it even though it's running on hardware very similar to the GameCube. There are a lot more characters and stages in this game, and I honestly think that's this game's strongest point, and that makes it perfect for multiplayer. Now, this game has multiple control methods, with the main one being the Wii Remote, and it controls horribly. Now, you can get a classic controller with button controls, but luckily for GameCube owners, you can use that instead. Now, thanks to the Wii's backwards compatibility with the GameCube, you can easily plug in a GameCube controller to use as a standard controller to play games with. The combat of this game feels fine, maybe a little slower than Melee, but it's still pretty fun, maybe just not as intense as Melee's. But if you actually want some good combat, you want to use a standard controller method and not the Wii Remote method.
And finally, the online.
Who am I kidding? The Wii Online in 2023? Yeah, I don't think so. However, it's still possible, and there is a big community for Mario Kart Wii Online, but not for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and that would be because Brawl's online was not good and was not what people wanted. Or so I have heard.
Yep, so that's Brawl. Not as big of a leap that Melee was, but still a fun game to play, and much cheaper. Yep, well, that was a really fun way to waste my time. But it's like I always tell myself, it's not a waste of time if I wasn't going to do anything anyway. I am really blanking on an excuse to talk about Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U right now. Yep, I got nothing.